pregnancy test fell from Sarah's trembling fingers, clattering onto the marble bathroom floor of their million-dollar home. Two pink lines stared back at her, but the crushing weight in her chest had nothing to do with morning sickness. She'd been trying to get pregnant for 3 years. 3 years of fertility treatments, ovulation schedules, and carefully timed closeness. The irony tasted bitter as copper pennies. Because David had been lying to her for months. Sarah picked up the test with shaking hands, staring at those 2 lines that should have meant everything. Instead, they felt like a capital punishment. How could she bring a child into this house of lies? How could she celebrate when she discovered the truth just 24 hours ago? The betrayal had started with something as simple as a misdirected text message. Can't wait to feel you again tonight. Same hotel, room 237. Delete this. K. The text had buzzed on David's phone while he showered yesterday morning. Sarah had glanced at it innocently, thinking it might be work-related. David ran a successful consulting firm and often received urgent messages. But the moment she read those words, her world tilted sideways. K. That had to be Kimberly, her own sister. Sarah's hands had trembled as she quickly forwarded the message to herself before deleting it from David's phone. Then she'd sat on their king-sized bed, staring at the evidence of her husband's affair with her younger sister. The sister she'd helped through college. The sister who'd been living in their guest house for the past 6 months while getting back on her feet after a messy divorce. Now, clutching the positive pregnancy test, Sarah felt something cold and calculating settle into her bones. David thought he was clever. Kimberly thought she was entitled to everything Sarah had worked for. They had no idea what was coming. The bathroom door opened, and David's reflection appeared in the mirror behind her. His perfectly styled brown hair was still damp from his morning run, and his expensive workout clothes clung to his lean frame. At 35, he still looked like the college quarterback who'd swept her off her feet 12 years ago. "Morning, beautiful," David said, flashing that million-dollar smile that had once made her weak in the knees. Now it made her sick. "You're up early." Sarah forced herself to smile back, slipping the pregnancy test into her robe pocket. "Couldn't sleep." David moved behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders as he met her eyes in the mirror. "Everything okay? You've seemed a little off lately." The audacity almost made her laugh. Of course she seemed off. She'd been watching her husband and sister destroy her life for months without realizing it. But David's concerned expression looked so genuine, so perfectly crafted. How many times had he practiced that look in the mirror? "Just tired," Sarah said, leaning back against his chest. She needed to buy time. "Work's been crazy." "Mine too," David said, kissing the top of her head. "Actually, I'm going to be out late again tonight. Big client dinner." Another lie. Sarah knew exactly where he'd be tonight. Room 237 at the Marriott downtown. She'd already called and confirmed that the same room had been booked 3 nights a week for the past 2 months under David's business account. "That's fine," Sarah said. "I'll probably go to bed early anyway." David squeezed her shoulders. "You know I love you, right?" The words hit her like physical blows. Sarah gripped the edge of the bathroom counter, forcing herself to remain calm. "I love you too." After David left for work, Sarah sat at her kitchen island with a cup of coffee she couldn't drink and the pregnancy test lying beside her laptop. She'd already called in sick to her job at the architectural firm. Today, she had more important work to do. First, she needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal. Sarah opened her laptop and logged into their shared bank accounts. David had always handled their finances, claiming he was better with numbers. She'd trusted him completely, signing whatever papers he put in front of her. Now she realized how naive she'd been. The first red flag was a second checking account she'd never seen before. It was linked to their primary account but hidden in the online banking interface. Sarah had to dig through months of statements to find the transfers. Small amounts at first, 500 here, 1,000 there. But in the last 3 months, the transfers had gotten bolder, 20,000, 50,000. Last week, he'd moved nearly $100,000. The money was being funneled into an investment account she'd never heard of. When Sarah called the investment firm, pretending to be confused about her account, the representative cheerfully informed her that the account was set up for David Mitchell and Kimberly Hartley. Joint ownership. Kimberly Hartley. Sarah's maiden name, which Kimberly had kept after her divorce. Sarah stared at the computer screen, her coffee growing cold. They weren't just having an affair. They were stealing her money and planning a future together. The realization hit her like a physical blow, doubling her over in her chair. But the worst was yet to come. Sarah drove to Kimberly's workplace, a trendy boutique in the arts district where her sister worked as a manager. Through the window, she could see Kimberly laughing with a customer, her blonde hair catching the afternoon light. At 28, Kimberly had always been the prettier sister, the one who turned heads when they walked into a room together. Sarah had never minded. She'd always been proud of her beautiful little sister. Now she wanted to march inside and slap that smile off Kimberly's face. Instead, Sarah parked across the street and waited. At exactly 2:30, Kimberly emerged from the boutique and walked to the coffee shop next door. Sarah followed at a distance, slipping into a corner booth where she could watch and listen. Kimberly was on the phone, her voice low but excited. "I know, baby, but we have to be careful a little longer," Kimberly said into her phone. "Sarah's been acting weird lately, like she suspects something." Sarah's heart pounded as she strained to hear every word. "No, she doesn't know about the money," Kimberly continued. "She's too trusting. Always has been. She still thinks I'm just her poor little sister who needs help." The laugh that followed was cruel and sharp. "Of course I feel bad sometimes," Kimberly said, "but Sarah's had everything handed to her our whole lives. The perfect husband, the perfect house, the perfect job. It's my turn now." Sarah gripped her coffee cup so tightly she thought it might shatter. "The lawyer said the divorce will be messy because of the prenup," Kimberly continued. "But once we're married and she's out of the picture, it won't matter. Half of everything will be ours anyway." Divorce. They were planning to divorce her and take half of everything she'd worked for, everything she'd built. Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. "Tonight?" Kimberly's voice got softer, more intimate. "God, yes. I can't wait to feel your hands on me again. Room 237, right? I'll be there by 8. Sarah couldn't listen anymore. She stumbled out of the coffee shop and back to her car, her whole body shaking. In the privacy of her BMW, she finally let herself cry. Great, heaving sobs that felt like they might tear her apart. But by the time she drove home, the tears had stopped. Something cold and hard had settled in their place. Sarah parked in her driveway and stared at the house she'd helped design, the garden she'd planted, the life she'd built with a man who was planning to destroy her. Not anymore. That evening, Sarah sat in her car in the Marriott parking lot, her phone connected to a high-quality recording app. She'd spent the afternoon researching surveillance laws and knew that recording in a hotel room was illegal, but the hallway was fair game. At exactly 7:45, she watched Kimberly's red Honda pull into the parking lot. Her sister was wearing a black dress Sarah had given her for Christmas, along with the diamond earrings that had been their mother's. The final insult. Sarah waited until Kimberly disappeared into the hotel before following. She took the elevator to the second floor and found room 237 at the end of the hallway. The door was already ajar. She could hear them inside. Kimberly's breathless laughter, David's deep voice murmuring endearments, the sound of clothing hitting the floor. Sarah pressed record on her phone and held it near the crack in the door. "God, I love you," David's voice came through clearly. "I can't wait until we don't have to sneak around anymore." "Soon," Kimberly replied. "Once the divorce is final, we can be together openly, start our real life." "I still can't believe Sarah hasn't figured it out," David said. "For someone so smart, she's incredibly naive. She always has been. Even as kids, I could get away with anything and she'd never suspect me. Remember when I broke her favorite vase and blamed it on the cat?" They both laughed. "This is bigger than a broken vase, Kim." "I know, but she deserves this. She's had everything I ever wanted my whole life. The perfect grades, the perfect college, the perfect career. Mom and Dad always loved her more. Well, now you get the perfect husband, too." More laughter, more sounds that made Sarah's stomach turn. "Speaking of which," Kimberly said, "the lawyer called today. He thinks we can get the divorce finalized in 6 months if we can prove she's unstable." "Unstable how?" "I don't know. Erratic behavior. Maybe she's having a breakdown. Wouldn't be hard to believe with all the fertility stress." "That's actually brilliant. She has been acting strange lately, always watching me, asking weird questions." "Because she's crazy," Kimberly said. "Poor Sarah. Too bad she's about to lose everything." Sarah had heard enough. She stopped recording and walked back to the elevator on unsteady legs. In the parking lot, she sat in her car and played back the recording. Every word was crystal clear. Every laugh was a knife to her heart, but now she had evidence. Now she had a plan. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a clarity she hadn't felt in months. She made coffee, ate breakfast, and sat down at her computer like it was any other day. But everything had changed. First, she called her own lawyer. Not the family attorney David knew about, but a shark recommended by a colleague at work. Margaret Stone specialized in complex divorces involving business assets and hidden money. She was expensive, ruthless, and exactly what Sarah needed. "I want to move fast," Sarah told Margaret during their afternoon meeting, "and I want to take them for everything they're worth." Margaret listened to the recording with a poker face that revealed nothing, but when it ended, she smiled. "This is good, very good, but we need more." "What kind of more?" "Financial records, evidence of the money transfers, documentation of his business accounts, and we need to move before they realize, you know." "How long do I have?" "If they're planning to file for divorce in 6 months, we need to file first, this week, if possible. But we also need to freeze those assets before they can move more money." Sarah felt a grim satisfaction settle in her chest. "What do you need me to do?" Over the next 3 days, Sarah became a detective in her own life. She photographed financial documents, printed bank statements, and compiled a portfolio of evidence that would have made a private investigator proud. She also did something else. She hired a private investigator. Jackson Palmer came highly recommended and specialized in infidelity cases. For $1,000, he followed David and Kimberly for 3 days and nights, documenting their affair with high-resolution photos and video. The images were devastating. David and Kimberly holding hands in restaurants, kissing in parking lots, entering and leaving the hotel together. But the real bombshell came when Jackson dug into their financial planning. "Your husband's been moving money for 6 months, Jackson told Sarah during their final meeting. "But here's the thing. He's not very good at covering his tracks. I found evidence of 3 other accounts you don't know about. And get this, they've already put a down payment on a house in Scottsdale." Sarah stared at the photos of a beautiful desert home with a "sold" sign in the yard. "They bought a house? Closing date is next month. Fully financed through his business accounts. Your money, in other words." The betrayal ran so deep Sarah could barely breathe. They weren't just planning to leave her. They'd already started their new life together. "There's more," Jackson said. "I followed your sister to a doctor's appointment yesterday. Congratulations. You're going to be an aunt." The room spun around Sarah. "She's pregnant?" "About 10 weeks, according to the paperwork I saw her carrying. Your husband's been busy." Sarah gripped the edge of Jackson's desk. While she'd been struggling with fertility treatments for 3 years, David had gotten her sister pregnant within months of starting their affair. The cruelty was breathtaking, but it also gave her an idea. That night, Sarah cooked David's favorite dinner, filet mignon with roasted vegetables and a bottle of his preferred wine. She wore the black dress he'd complimented her in on their anniversary, styled her hair the way he liked it, and put on makeup for the first time in weeks. David seemed surprised when he walked into their dining room and found candles lit and soft music playing. "What's all this?" he asked, looking genuinely confused. "I wanted to do something special," Sarah said, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I know I've been distant lately. Work stress, you know. But I realized I've been neglecting what's really important." David's smile looked forced. "You don't need to apologize, sweetheart. I understand." They sat down to dinner, and Sarah played the part of the loving wife perfectly. She asked about his work, laughed at his jokes, and refilled his wine glass whenever it got low. David seemed to relax as the evening progressed, his guard dropping with each sip of wine. "I have something to tell you," Sarah said as they finished dessert. David's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "Oh!" Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out the pregnancy test. David's face went white as she placed it on the table between them. "I'm pregnant," Sarah said, watching his reaction carefully. For a moment, David looked like he might be sick. Then his training kicked in, and he forced his face into an expression of joy. That's wonderful, Sarah. I'm so happy." But his voice was hollow, and his hands were shaking. "I know we've been trying for so long," Sarah continued. "I was starting to think it would never happen, but maybe this is exactly the right time." David nodded, but he couldn't meet her eyes. "When did you find out?" "Yesterday morning." "I wanted to surprise you with a special dinner." Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. "We're going to be parents, David. Isn't that amazing?" "Amazing," David repeated, but he looked like he was going to throw up. Sarah squeezed his hand. "I love you so much. I can't wait to start our family." That night, David made an excuse about having to work late and disappeared into his home office. Sarah could hear him on the phone, his voice urgent and hushed. She pressed her ear to the door and caught fragments of the conversation. "Complicated everything. Can't leave now. Pregnant. Need to think." Sarah smiled to herself as she went upstairs to bed. Let them think she was pregnant. Let them scramble to adjust their plans. She had work to do. The next morning, while David was at his office and Kimberly was at work, Sarah paid a visit to the house her sister was renting. She'd always had a spare key, a remnant from the days when she'd helped Kimberly move in. Sarah searched through Kimberly's bedroom until she found what she was looking for. A small pile of documents hidden in the back of her sister's underwear drawer. Prenatal vitamins, ultrasound pictures, appointment cards for an OB/GYN. The ultrasound was dated 2 weeks ago. In the corner, Sarah could see the gestational age. 10 weeks, 3 days. 10 weeks ago, Kimberly had been in Sarah's house, eating at Sarah's table, pretending to be the loving sister who needed help getting back on her feet. While sleeping with Sarah's husband, Sarah photographed everything with her phone, then carefully put it all back exactly where she'd found it. As she prepared to leave, her phone buzzed with a text from David. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up." Another lie. Another night at the hotel with Kimberly, probably discussing what to do about Sarah's inconvenient pregnancy. Sarah had a better idea. That evening, instead of going home, Sarah drove to her parents' house across town. Robert and Linda Hartley were in their 70s, retired and devoted to their evening routine of dinner and television. They were delighted to see their elder daughter. "Sarah, sweetheart," Linda hugged her tightly. "What brings you by?" "I wanted to talk to you about something important," Sarah said, settling into the familiar comfort of her childhood living room. She told them about the pregnancy test, watching their faces light up with joy. Then she told them about the affair, watching that joy turn to horror and disbelief. "Kimberly would never do that," Linda said firmly. "You must be mistaken." "Mom, I have proof." Sarah played the hotel room recording on her phone. By the time it finished, both her parents were crying. "I can't believe this," Robert said, his voice shaking. "Our own daughter. How could she do this to you?" "She's always been jealous," Sarah said quietly. "I just never thought she'd go this far." "What are you going to do?" Linda asked. "I'm going to divorce David and make sure they both pay for what they've done. But I need your help." Sarah's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Tomorrow was Saturday, and the whole family was supposed to gather for their monthly dinner at Sarah and David's house. Kimberly would be there, along with David's parents and Sarah's aunt and uncle. Everyone who mattered would be in one room. "I want to tell everyone the truth," Sarah said, "all at once. I want them to see exactly who Kimberly and David really are." "Are you sure that's wise?" Robert asked. "It could get ugly. Dad, they've been stealing from me for months. They're planning to frame me as mentally unstable so they can take everything I've worked for. And now Kimberly's pregnant with my husband's baby while I've been struggling with fertility treatments for years. It's already ugly." Linda reached over and squeezed Sarah's hand. "What do you need us to do?" Saturday evening arrived, with a thunderstorm brewing on the horizon. Sarah spent the day preparing dinner and setting up her dining room like a stage. She'd hidden small recording devices around the room and positioned her laptop on the sideboard, connected to the large-screen TV on the wall. David seemed nervous all day, checking his phone constantly and jumping at every sound. He'd clearly told Kimberly about the pregnancy, and they were both scrambling to figure out their next move. "Are you feeling okay?" he asked Sarah for the third time as she arranged flowers on the dining table. "You seem different." "I feel wonderful," Sarah said truthfully. "Better than I have in months." The guests began arriving at 6. David's parents, James and Patricia Mitchell, came first. They were polite but distant people who'd never quite warmed to Sarah, though they'd accepted her as suitable for their successful son. Sarah's Aunt Margaret and Uncle Paul arrived next, followed by her parents. Everyone was excited about the pregnancy announcement Sarah had promised to make during dinner. Kimberly was the last to arrive, looking pale and anxious in a flowing dress that didn't quite hide the small bump at her waist. She hugged Sarah with what seemed like genuine emotion. "I'm so happy for you," Kimberly whispered in Sarah's ear. "About the baby. You deserve everything good in life." The hypocrisy was staggering. Sarah smiled and hugged her sister back. "Thank you. That means everything to me." They gathered around the dining room table, 8 people who had no idea they were about to witness a reckoning years in the making. Sarah served the first course and poured wine for everyone except herself and Kimberly, who claimed to be on antibiotics. "So," Patricia Mitchell said, eyeing Sarah's untouched wine glass, "we hear there's big news to share." "There is," Sarah said, standing up. "But first, I want to say how grateful I am to have all of you here tonight. Family is everything, isn't it? The people we trust, the people we count on, the people who would never betray us." She looked directly at David and Kimberly as she spoke. David had gone pale, and Kimberly was staring at her plate. "Sarah," David said carefully, "maybe we should wait until after dinner for announcements." "Oh, I think everyone's ready to hear this now," Sarah said. She picked up her laptop and connected it to the TV. "You see, I do have big news. I'm not the only one in this family who's pregnant." A confused murmur went around the table. "What do you mean?" Linda asked. Sarah clicked play on the hotel room recording. David's voice filled the dining room, crystal clear and unmistakable. "God, I love you. I can't wait until we don't have to sneak around anymore." Kimberly's fork clattered to her plate. David shot to his feet. "Sarah, what are you doing?" "Telling the truth," Sarah said calmly. She let the recording play for another minute, long enough for everyone to understand exactly what they were hearing. The silence that followed was deafening. "This can't be real," Patricia Mitchell whispered. "Oh, it's real," Sarah said. She clicked to the next file, the photographs Jackson had taken. Images of David and Kimberly together filled the large screen, holding hands, kissing, entering the hotel together. "You sick little witch," Sarah's Aunt Margaret spat at Kimberly. "How could you do this to your own sister?" Kimberly was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. "It's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," Sarah said. She clicked to the next presentation slide bank statements showing the money transfers. "David's been stealing from our joint accounts for 6 months. They've bought a house together in Arizona. And Kimberly's 10 weeks pregnant with my husband's baby." The room erupted. Robert Hartley lunged across the table toward David, only to be restrained by his brother-in-law. Linda was sobbing. Patricia Mitchell was staring at her son like she'd never seen him before. "I can explain," David said desperately. "Can you explain this?" Sarah clicked to the final slide, a printout of the prenatal ultrasound she'd found in Kimberly's drawer. "While I've been suffering through years of fertility treatments, you've been getting my sister pregnant behind my back." "Sarah, please," Kimberly spoke for the first time since the recording started. "I know how this looks, but..." "How it looks?" Sarah's voice was deadly quiet. "How it looks is like my husband and my sister have been plotting to destroy my life while I fed you, housed you, and treated you like family." "You don't understand," Kimberly said, her voice rising. "You've always had everything. The perfect life, the perfect career, the perfect husband. Some of us have had to fight for scraps. So you decided to steal mine?" "I decided to take what should have been mine in the first place." The mask was finally off. Kimberly's face was twisted with years of resentment and jealousy. "I was always prettier than you," Kimberly continued, her voice growing louder. "Smarter than you. More fun. But somehow you got everything and I got nothing. Well, now David's mine. The baby's mine. And after the divorce, half of your precious, perfect life will be mine too." "Is that what you think?" Sarah asked quietly. "I know that's what's going to happen. Your husband loves me now. We're having a baby together. You're just the bitter ex-wife who couldn't keep her man happy." Sarah smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Kimberly, you beautiful, stupid girl. Do you really think I'm going to let you destroy my life?" She clicked to one more screen, a legal document. "This is a restraining order. Effective immediately, neither of you is allowed within 500 feet of me or this house. This is also a notice of divorce proceedings, filed 3 days ago before either of you knew I'd figured out your little scheme." David's face went white. "You can't do this." "Oh, but I can, and I have. You see, when you started moving money 6 months ago, you violated our prenuptial agreement. The clause about financial infidelity is very clear. In the event of infidelity combined with financial misconduct, the guilty party forfeits all claim to marital assets." "That's not legal," David sputtered. "It is when you have recordings of you admitting to the affair and planning to frame me as mentally unstable. My lawyer says it's the most airtight case she's ever seen." Sarah looked around the table at her family, her expression calm and controlled. David, you have 1 hour to pack your personal belongings and get out of my house. Kimberly, you have until tomorrow morning to vacate the guest house. The locks will be changed tomorrow afternoon. Where are we supposed to go? Kimberly asked, panic creeping into her voice. I hear Arizona's nice this time of year. Oh wait, you can't move to Arizona. The house you bought with my money? I've already filed an injunction to stop the sale. Turns out, when you use stolen funds for real estate transactions, it complicates things legally. David slumped back into his chair. Sarah, please, can't we work this out? Talk about this like adults? Like adults? Sarah's composure finally cracked. Like adults? You mean the way adults discuss major life decisions with their spouses? The way adults handle marital problems through communication and counseling instead of affair and theft? Her voice was rising now, 12 years of trust and love curdling into rage. You want to talk like adults? Here's an adult conversation. You are a lying, cheating, stealing piece of garbage who threw away 12 years of marriage for a cheap thrill with my sister. And Kimberly, she turned to face her sister, you are a selfish, entitled brat who decided that being jealous gave you the right to destroy my life. I'm your sister, Kimberly whispered. No, Sarah said firmly. Sisters don't sleep with each other's husbands. Sisters don't steal each other's money. Sisters don't plot to frame each other as mentally unstable. You stopped being my sister the moment you decided I deserved to have my life destroyed. The storm outside had arrived, lightning illuminating the dining room through the large windows. Everyone at the table sat in stunned silence, processing the destruction of a family. Robert Hartley was the first to speak. Kimberly, I want you to know that your mother and I will not be helping you through this. You made your choice. You can live with the consequences. Daddy, please, don't. Robert's voice was harder than Sarah had ever heard it. You've brought shame on this family. You've hurt your sister in ways that can never be forgiven. As far as I'm concerned, I have one daughter now. Linda was still crying, but she nodded in agreement. How could you do this, Kimmy? How could you be so cruel? Because she's always been cruel, Sarah said quietly. I just never let myself see it. The lies, the manipulation, the way she always managed to make herself the sufferer. I made excuses for her because she was my baby sister, but she's not a baby anymore. She's a grown woman who made a choice to destroy her own family. David finally found his voice. The baby, Sarah. What about the baby? What about it? It's innocent in all this. Yes, it is. And I actually feel sorry for that child. Having two selfish, lying parents who care more about money and revenge than building a stable home. Sarah's voice was ice cold. But that baby isn't my responsibility. It's yours. You two created this mess. You get to figure out how to clean it up. Patricia Mitchell spoke up for the first time since the recording ended. David, I raised you better than this. Mom? No, don't say anything. I'm ashamed of you. We're ashamed of you. She looked at her husband, who nodded grimly. You'll get no help from us. We won't be part of this disgrace. Sarah stood up from the table. Dinner's over. David, your hour starts now. Everyone else, you're welcome to stay while he packs. But I understand if you'd rather leave. One by one, the family members filed out into the storm. Sarah's parents hugged her tightly before they left. We're proud of you, her father whispered, for being strong enough to do what needed to be done. Call us if you need anything, her mother added. Anything at all. David's parents left without saying goodbye to their son. Margaret and Paul offered to help Sarah change the locks and deal with any legal paperwork. Within an hour, only Sarah, David, and Kimberly remained in the house. David had packed 2 suitcases and was loading them into his car. The rain was coming down in sheets now, soaking him as he made trips back and forth. Sarah watched from the front door, feeling nothing. This isn't over, he said as he loaded the last bag. I have rights. The business is half mine. Actually, it's not, Sarah said. The business was started with money from my trust fund, money you've been stealing from to finance your affair. My lawyer's already frozen all business accounts pending a forensic audit. David's face crumpled. You're destroying me. No, David, you destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. He drove away without another word. Kimberly emerged from the guest house an hour later, her own belongings packed into her small Honda. She walked to the front door where Sarah was still standing. I hate you, Kimberly said simply. I know, Sarah replied. You always have. The only difference is now I know it too. This won't make you happy. Revenge never does. Maybe not, but it makes me free. Kimberly started to leave, then turned back. What am I supposed to tell people about the baby? Tell them the truth. That you're having a baby with a married man who stole from his wife to buy you pretty things? Tell them that you destroyed your family for a man who'll probably leave you the moment someone younger and prettier comes along. He loves me. He loved me too. For 12 years. Right up until he decided he loved your body more than his marriage vows. Sarah stepped closer. You think you won something, Kimberly? You won a cheating husband with no money, no business, and no family. Congratulations. Kimberly's composure finally broke. She sobbed as she got into her car and drove away into the storm. Sarah closed the front door and locked it. Then she walked through her house, turning off lights and checking windows. In the kitchen, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat at the island where this had all started just 1 week ago. The pregnancy test was still in her purse. She took it out and looked at it one more time before dropping it in the trash. She'd never been pregnant. The test belonged to her coworker, Amy, who'd asked Sarah to pick it up from the pharmacy. Sarah had simply used it as a prop in her elaborate revenge. Her phone buzzed with a text from Margaret Stone, her lawyer. Emergency injunction granted. All assets frozen. They can't touch anything. Call me Monday to discuss next steps. Sarah smiled and deleted the message. Tomorrow she'd start rebuilding her life. She'd already spoken to her boss about taking a leave of absence. She had money saved, and once the divorce was final, she'd have even more. She was thinking about traveling. Maybe Europe. Maybe somewhere she'd never been, where she could start fresh. Another text came in, this one from Jackson Palmer. Surveillance footage from hotel shows them meeting someone else. Looks like David owes money to some very unfriendly people. Thought you should know. Sarah deleted that message too. Whatever financial troubles David had gotten himself into weren't her problem anymore. The storm was starting to pass, and Sarah could see stars peeking through the clouds. She finished her wine and went upstairs to her bedroom. Her bedroom now, in her house, paid for with her money. For the first time in months, she slept peacefully. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the courthouse in downtown Phoenix, watching a judge finalize her divorce decree. David looked terrible. Thinner, older, defeated. The business was gone, sold to pay his debts. The house in Arizona had been seized by creditors. His affair with Kimberly had imploded within weeks when the money ran out, and the stress of their situation became too much. Kimberly had moved back in with their parents, who grudgingly provided support for their unborn grandchild but made it clear that their younger daughter's choices had consequences. The baby was due in 2 months, and Kimberly would be raising it alone. David caught Sarah's eye as they left the courthouse. "I hope you're happy," he said bitterly. "I'm free," Sarah replied. "That's better than happy." She walked away without looking back. Sarah had used her newfound freedom well. She'd taken that trip to Europe, spending 3 months traveling through Italy, France, and Spain. She'd started seeing a therapist to work through the betrayal and rebuild her ability to trust. Most importantly, she'd met someone. His name was Michael, and he was nothing like David. Where David had been polished and calculating, Michael was genuine and kind. He was a veterinarian who rescued stray animals in his spare time and had never owned a suit that cost more than $200. He made Sarah laugh in ways she'd forgotten were possible. They'd met in a small cafe in Rome where Sarah was sketching architectural details, and Michael was reading a book about sustainable farming. He'd noticed her drawings and struck up a conversation about the building techniques used in ancient Roman construction. 3 hours later, they were still talking. Michael knew about her divorce, but not the details. Sarah had simply said her marriage ended due to infidelity and financial disagreements. She wasn't ready to tell the whole story yet, but for the first time in over a year, she was looking forward to the future. The judge's gavel brought her back to the present moment. "Divorce decree is final," the clerk announced. "Court is adjourned." Sarah walked out of the courthouse into the Arizona sunshine, officially free. Her phone immediately buzzed with a text from Michael, who was back in Chicago finishing up his residency at the animal hospital. "How did it go?" "I'm thinking of you." Sarah smiled as she typed back. "It's over, finally. Come home. I have something to show you." Home. The word felt strange but good. Sarah had decided to stay in Chicago, but she'd sold the house she'd shared with David. Too many memories, too much pain. Instead, she'd bought a smaller place in a different neighborhood, somewhere she could start fresh. As Sarah got into her rental car for the drive to the airport, her phone rang. She almost didn't answer when she saw Kimberly's name on the screen. They hadn't spoken since that night 6 months ago. "What do you want?" Sarah answered curtly. "I had the baby." Kimberly's voice was small and tired. Sarah felt an unexpected pang of something, not quite sympathy, but not indifference either. "Congratulations." "It's a girl. She's beautiful, Sarah." "I'm sure she is." "I named her Hope." Sarah closed her eyes. "Their grandmother's name." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to know that I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. I know it doesn't change anything, but I needed you to hear it. You're right, it doesn't change anything. I know. But maybe someday, maybe when she's older, Hope could know her aunt. You're the only family I have left who isn't disgusted with me." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Kimberly, I hope you're a good mother. I hope you learn from your mistakes and give that little girl a better example than the one you set for yourself. But I'm not ready to be anyone's aunt right now. Maybe not ever." "I understand." "Do you? Do you really understand what you did to me? What you took away? I destroyed your marriage. I stole your money. I betrayed your trust." "You destroyed my ability to believe in family," Sarah said quietly. "You were my sister, my baby sister. I would have done anything for you, and you knew that. You used it against me in the cruelest way possible." Kimberly was crying now. "I know. I hate myself for it every day." "Good. You should." Sarah's voice was cold. "But hating yourself doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't give me back the 3 years of fertility treatments David was sabotaging because he was already planning his exit strategy with you. It doesn't give me back the trust I'll never fully have in another person again. Sarah, I have to go. Take care of your daughter, Kimberly. Be better for her than you were for me." Sarah hung up and turned off her phone. She didn't want to think about Kimberly or the baby or any of it anymore. That part of her life was over. The flight back to Chicago was smooth, and Michael was waiting for her at the airport with flowers and a smile that made her heart skip. He wrapped her in a hug that felt like coming home. "How are you feeling?" he asked as they walked to his car. "Free. Really, truly free for the first time in years." "Good, because I have a surprise for you." They drove to Sarah's new house, a charming 1920s bungalow she'd fallen in love with the moment she saw it. But when they pulled into the driveway, Sarah noticed something different. The front garden had been completely transformed. Where there had been weedy grass and overgrown shrubs, now there were carefully planned flower beds, a small fountain, and a pathway lined with solar lights. "Michael, what did you do?" "I know you've been too busy with the divorce to work on the house," he said, looking nervous. "And I know how much you love gardening, so I thought, well, I hoped you wouldn't mind if I gave you a fresh start here too." Sarah walked through the garden in amazement. Everything was perfectly planned and beautifully executed. Roses, lavender, and jasmine created a fragrant border around the property. A small vegetable garden was tucked into one corner, with tomatoes and herbs already showing new growth. "This must have taken weeks," Sarah said. "It did. I wanted it to be perfect for when you got back." Sarah turned to face him, tears in her eyes. "No one's ever done anything like this for me." "Well, no one's ever made me want to plant a garden before," Michael said, pulling her close. "I love you, Sarah. I know it's soon, and I know you're still healing, but I needed you to know." "I love you too," Sarah whispered against his chest. "I didn't think I'd ever be able to say that again." They stood in the garden as the sun set, surrounded by the life Michael had planted for her future. For the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah felt genuinely happy. 2 years later, Sarah stood in that same garden wearing a simple white dress and surrounded by the people who truly mattered. Her parents were there, beaming with pride. Margaret and Paul had flown in from Florida. Michael's family had welcomed her with open arms, and several of her colleagues from the architectural firm had come to celebrate. The wedding was small and perfect, nothing like the elaborate affair she'd had with David. This time, Sarah knew she was marrying a man who loved her for who she was, not what she could provide. As they exchanged vows under an arbor covered in climbing roses, Sarah caught sight of a familiar car driving slowly past the house. Kimberly's red Honda, moving just slowly enough for the driver to see the wedding ceremony in progress. Sarah felt a moment of sadness, not for the relationship they'd lost, but for the sister she'd never really had. Then Michael squeezed her hand, and she focused on the man who'd chosen to build something beautiful with her instead of tearing down what she'd already built. Do you, Sarah Elizabeth Hartley, take Michael James Connor to be your lawfully wed husband? I do, Sarah said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. The kiss that followed tasted like new beginnings and hard-won wisdom. In the distance, the red Honda drove away and didn't come back. After the ceremony, as they danced to their first song as husband and wife, Michael whispered in Sarah's ear, "Any regrets?" Sarah looked around at the life she'd rebuilt from the ashes of her old one. A career she loved, a home she'd chosen, friends who valued her for who she was, and a husband who'd proven his love through actions rather than words. "Just one," she said. Michael's face showed concern. "What?" "I regret that it took me so long to realize I deserved better than what I had before." Michael spun her around, and Sarah laughed, a sound of pure joy that carried across the garden and into the night sky. 6 months after the wedding, Sarah received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with just a few lines written in Kimberly's handwriting. "Sarah, I saw your wedding. You looked happy. Truly happy in a way I don't think you ever were with David. I'm glad. Hope is walking now and saying new words every day. She's smart like you were at that age. Sometimes I wonder if she would have been better off with you as her mother instead of me. I know you'll probably throw this away without reading it, but I needed you to know that destroying your happiness didn't make me happy. It just made me realize how empty I was inside. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I hurt the person who loved me most. The therapist says I may never fully understand it, but I'm trying to become someone worthy of forgiveness, even if that forgiveness never comes. I hope your new life brings you everything you deserve. Kimberly." Sarah read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in her desk drawer. She didn't throw it away, but she didn't respond either. Some wounds could heal, but some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. That evening, she told Michael about the letter as they worked together in their garden. "How does it make you feel?" he asked, carefully transplanting seedlings they'd started indoors. "Sad, mostly. Not for her, but for what could have been. If she'd been different, or if I'd seen who she really was sooner, maybe things could have ended differently." "Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" Sarah considered the question as she watered the new plants. "I don't know. Maybe forgiveness isn't really the point. Maybe the point is that I don't need her forgiveness or her apology to be happy. I built this life without her, and it's better than anything I had when she was in it." Michael smiled. "That sounds like wisdom to me." "Hard-earned wisdom," Sarah corrected. "The most expensive kind." A year later, Sarah got a call from her mother. Kimberly had been in a car accident. Nothing serious, just a broken leg and some bruises. But in the aftermath, dealing with insurance and medical bills as a single mother, she'd finally asked their parents for help. "She's different now," Linda told Sarah over the phone. "Quieter, more thoughtful. She never asks about you, but I can see in her eyes that she thinks about you." "Mom, why are you telling me this?" "Because I know you, sweetheart. You have a good heart, and I don't want you carrying guilt that isn't yours to carry." "I don't feel guilty." "Don't you? Not even a little bit?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes I wonder if I could have handled it differently, been less ruthless in my revenge." "Sarah Elizabeth Connor," Linda said firmly, using Sarah's married name for the first time. "That girl tried to destroy your life. She succeeded in destroying your marriage and stealing your money. She was planning to frame you as mentally unstable and take everything you'd worked for. You defended yourself the only way you could. I know that logically. But emotionally? Emotionally, I sometimes feel like I became someone I didn't recognize. Someone calculating and cold." "You became someone strong enough to save herself," Linda said. "There's a difference." After they hung up, Sarah sat in her home office, staring at the drawer where she'd kept Kimberly's letter. Finally, she opened it and read the letter one more time. Then she took out a piece of paper and wrote her own letter. "Kimberly, I heard about your accident. I hope you're healing well. I've been thinking about forgiveness lately. Not the kind where we pretend nothing happened and go back to being sisters because that's not possible, but the kind where I stop letting what you did define how I see the world. I'm not ready to have you in my life again. I may never be ready for that, but I'm ready to stop hating you. Hatred takes too much energy, and I'd rather spend that energy on the people who love me. I hope you're learning to love yourself in healthier ways. I hope you're becoming the mother hope deserves, and I hope someday you understand that the happiness you were so jealous of wasn't something I had handed to me. It was something I built, piece by piece, through hard work and good choices. You can build that kind of happiness too, if you stop looking for it in other people's lives. Take care of yourself. Sarah. She mailed the letter the next day and felt something shift inside her chest. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a kind of peace. She was done letting Kimberly's choices shape her future. 5 years after the divorce, Sarah and Michael bought a larger house with room for the family they were planning. The fertility treatments that had failed with David worked perfectly with Michael, and Sarah found herself pregnant at 38. On the day their son was born, Sarah held him in her arms and marveled at how different this moment felt from anything she'd experienced with David. There was no anxiety about the future, no fear that this happiness would be stolen from her, just pure, uncomplicated joy. "He's perfect," Michael whispered, stroking the baby's tiny hand. "He's ours," Sarah corrected. "Really, truly ours." As if summoned by her words, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I heard about the baby. Congratulations. He's lucky to have you as his mother." Sarah showed the message to Michael, who raised an eyebrow. "How did she get your number?" "Probably from Mom. The question is, what do I do about it?" "What do you want to do?" Sarah looked down at her son sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I want to focus on this, on us, on the life we're building together." She deleted the message without responding and blocked the number. "No more looking backward," she said to Michael. "Only forward from now on." Michael kissed her forehead. "I love you, Mrs. Connor. I love you too, both of you." Outside their hospital room window, Chicago stretched out beneath them, full of possibilities and new beginnings. Sarah had learned the hard way that happiness wasn't something that could be stolen, only given away. And she was done giving hers away to people who didn't deserve it. She'd built a life worth protecting, and this time, she knew exactly how strong she was. 10 years later, Sarah stood in the kitchen of their family home, making breakfast for Michael and their 2 children, Thomas, now 9, and Emma, 7. The house was filled with the comfortable chaos of a happy family. School papers on the counter, soccer cleats by the door, and the sound of children arguing over who got the last piece of bacon. The life she'd built was imperfect and noisy and absolutely nothing like the pristine, controlled existence she'd had with David. It was also the most beautiful thing she'd ever created. Her phone rang as she was packing lunchboxes. The caller ID showed her father's number. "Hi, Dad." "Sarah, honey, I need to tell you something." Robert's voice was heavy. "Kimberly passed away last night." Sarah sank into a kitchen chair, the lunchbox falling from her hands. "What happened?" "Cancer. She'd been fighting it for 2 years, but she didn't want anyone to know. Robert's voice broke. "She didn't want you to feel obligated to help or visit. She said she'd taken enough from you." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling a complicated mix of sadness and relief and regret. "How's Hope?" "She's 14 now, smart as a whip just like you were. Kimberly left instructions. She wants Hope to stay with us, but she also left you a letter. Asked us to give it to you after." "Dad, I don't know if I can..." "She also left you something else. Her house. It's not much, but it's paid off. She said she wanted Hope to have a college fund, and the money from selling it should be enough." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing this final, unexpected gesture from the sister who had betrayed her so completely. "The funeral's Saturday," Robert continued. "You don't have to come. No one expects you to, but I thought you should know." After they hung up, Sarah sat in her kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of her happy life, and cried for the sister she'd lost years before Kimberly actually died. She cried for the relationship that might have been, for the aunt she'd never been to Hope, and for the complicated mess of love and hurt that had defined their family for so long. Michael found her there when he came downstairs for coffee. "What's wrong?" Sarah told him about the call, about Kimberly's passing and the letter and the house. Michael listened without judgment, offering comfort when she needed it and space when she needed that instead. "Are you going to the funeral?" he asked finally. "I don't know. Part of me feels like I should, for Hope's sake, but part of me thinks my presence would just make things harder for everyone." "What does your gut tell you?" Sarah considered this. "That Kimberly spent the last years of her life trying to undo some of the damage she caused. Not for me, but for Hope. Maybe the kindest thing I can do is let her final gesture stand without complicating it with my presence." Instead of attending the funeral, Sarah wrote a check for Hope's college fund and sent it to her parents with a note saying she hoped Hope would use her education to build the kind of life she truly wanted, rather than trying to take someone else's. She never opened Kimberly's final letter. Some conversations were better left unfinished. The years that followed were marked by the ordinary milestones of a life well lived: career successes and family vacations, children's graduations and anniversaries, the slow, steady accumulation of happiness that comes from making good choices day after day. Sarah never saw David again after the courthouse in Arizona. She heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd remarried and moved to Florida, where he worked as a sales representative for a medical supply company. The life he'd built after their divorce was smaller and quieter than the one he'd thrown away, but it was honest work with honest money, and Sarah found she could wish him well from a distance. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Michael surprised Sarah with a trip to Rome, where they'd first met. They sat in the same cafe where they'd talked for hours about ancient architecture and modern dreams, and Sarah marveled at how much her life had changed since then. "Any regrets?" Michael asked, echoing the question he'd asked on their wedding day. Sarah looked across the table at her husband, older now, with gray threading through his hair and laugh lines around his eyes. Behind him, she could see the Roman architecture that had fascinated her all those years ago, still standing strong after centuries of weather and war and change. "Just one," she said, smiling. "What's that?" "I regret that I wasted so many years thinking happiness was something that happened to me instead of something I created for myself." Michael reached across the table and took her hand. "Well, you figured it out eventually." "Yes," Sarah said, thinking of the sister who never had, of the husband who'd chosen shortcuts over substance, of the life she'd built from the ashes of their betrayal. "I did." That night, in their hotel room overlooking the ancient city, Sarah finally felt the last of her anger dissolve. Not into forgiveness. She wasn't sure she'd ever truly forgive Kimberly or David for what they'd tried to take from her, but into something better: indifference. They couldn't hurt her anymore because she'd become someone too strong to be destroyed by other people's choices. She'd learned the difference between loving someone and letting them define her worth. She'd built a life so solid and genuine that no amount of betrayal could shake its foundation. Sarah fell asleep that night with Michael's arm around her, listening to the sounds of a city that had survived everything history could throw at it and emerged more beautiful than before. She understood now that some kinds of damage could only make you stronger.